Welcome to my channel, Vintage Glam. I'm your host, Yvonne. In today's episode, I'm talking about the most influential fashion editor of the late 20th century, Diana Vreeland. Her career in fashion spans 6 decades, starting from her early days as fashion editor at Harpers Bazaar through her tenure as editor-in-chief at Vogue until her final role as consultant to the Costume Institute at the Met. I'll be covering Diana's career in 2 parts. This installment will highlight her time at Harpers Bazaar. These are the years where Diana takes everything she learned instinctually about fashion and her education abroad in haute couture. She combines it, crystallizes it, and then transmutes it into powerful editorials. These are filled with Diana's eye for fashion, her passions, and her energies. Diana was born during the Belle Epoque in Paris in 1903 to a well-to-do American mother and English father. This beautiful age was a period in Europe between 1871 and 1914 that marked a great time of artistic and cultural achievement. This age played a role in how Diana defined herself and would show up later in her work. In 1904, her family moved to New York City, where they mixed with the cosmopolitan and bohemian set. Masters of the Russian ballet and other artists of note often visited her parents' home. Diana was enrolled in a Russian dance school. This gave her a lifelong love affair with dance. Spending time amongst these artists and dancers made a huge imprint on her imagination. Flights of fantasy and costume played a major role in her fashion career, but it was mixed with a hardworking discipline. Diana was an unconventional beauty. Dark curly hair, dark eyes, and a large nose. Her mother referred to her as her ugly little monster. She favored Diana's younger sister, Alexandria, who was deemed much prettier. I think this may have caused Diana to focus on external beauty and extravagant appearance. During the jazz age of the 1920s, Diana started coming into her own. Women were suddenly becoming more in charge of their personal destinies. They were mobile and active, and this was reflected in fashion. The heavy corsets of the Victorian era gave way to dresses that were cut closer to the body and lighter in weight. Women styled their hair into sleek bobs and could often be seen smoking cigarettes, as they were newly advertised as slimming aids. Diana embraced it all, becoming the quintessential jazz baby. She went dancing at the Cotton Club in Harlem, smoked cigarettes with long tips, and dressed in all the latest fashions. In 1924, Diana married Thomas Vreeland, a handsome Yale graduate with movie star good looks. They set up home in Albany, where Thomas worked, and Diana gave birth to her 2 sons, Timmy and Frederick. This was a period of domestic bliss. Diana and her family moved to London in 1929 for Thomas's work. They took up residence in a historic neighborhood near Regent's Park. This allowed her to mingle with English aristocrats and international artists. Diana believed her real education in fashion began here. In London, Diana also began a lifelong friendship with artist and photographer Cecil Beaton. She made regular trips to Paris and became acquainted with the world of haute couture. Diana patronized Mame Boucher, Elsa Schiaparelli, and Madame Vianney. But the most important relationship from this era was with Coco Chanel. Diana became a mannequin du monde, someone who wore the right pieces to the right parties. Diana pronounced her name as Diana because she thought it gave her an air of sophistication. Diana had multiple inheritances, so she spent freely. When she began to worry about money, she opened up a small lingerie shop near London's Berkeley Square. She purchased the fabrics in Paris, and the sewing was done by sisters from a convent in London. Her shop was supported by her aristocratic acquaintances and artistic friends. This establishes her role as a fashion leader among the circle of wealth and taste. Diana moved back to New York in 1935. She was asked to come work for Harpers Bazaar by the editor-in-chief Carmel Snow. She was reinventing the magazine to become more forward-thinking and artistic. She hired new photographers, avant-garde art directors, and a young Diana Vreeland. Diana was writing a funny and outrageous column entitled "Why Don't You?" After 3 years, she was made fashion editor. She would spend the next 23 years crafting and honing her visual style. She created modernist, surreal, and otherworldly fashion editorials that captured the spirit and modernity of the 1930s. During World War II, the design houses in Europe had closed. Now clothing production was centered on 7th Avenue in New York. This was a chance for American designers to show their ingenuity and be at the forefront of fashion design. Diana took her role as fashion editor for an American magazine very seriously. More innovations in fashion came. Diana helped design the popover dress with a young designer named Claire McCardle. It was designed to easily pop over a woman's figure so she could handle many tasks. The dress was $6.95 and manufactured by Lord & Taylor. It was a massive success. Diana helped create two fashion items that we still use today, the Capri sandal and Revlon nail polish. Diana had a pair of custom thong sandals made by a shoemaker. After making a pair for Diana, the shoemaker took the designs and sold the sandals to the public. A similar story happened with Revlon nail polish. During that time, nail polish took a long time to dry. Diana had 2 vials of varnish made for her in Paris before the war by her manicurist. It was a special quick-drying formula. She took it to a chemist named Charles Revson to be copied. He then took the copy of this formula and created his own company. This was the beginning of the Revlon beauty empire. After the war, fashion was in transition. Women were tired of the looks associated with wartime, and more feminine looks took hold. During this time, Diana's influence over 7th Avenue and the socialite scene in New York City continued to grow. In 1955, Diana and her husband Thomas bought an apartment on Park Avenue. Diana enlisted the help of her friend Billy Baldwin to transform it. It was dubbed the Garden of Hell and became one of New York City's most famous interiors. She was also characterized in the film Funny Face, starring Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire. By the late 1950s, Harpers Bazaar was starting to lose its edge. The Hearst executives wanted to increase advertising revenue. They replaced Carmel Snow with her niece Nancy White, a former editor of Good Housekeeping. Diana was incensed that she had been passed over. Due to her personal connections in the same social circles, Diana was able to get the new young president, John F. Kennedy, his wife Jacqueline, and children photographed for Harper's Bazaar by Richard Avedon. They appeared in the February 1961 issue. Diana asked for a raise, and after 26 years, she was only offered $1,000. She found this offer insulting, on top of being upset at being passed over for the role of editor-in-chief. She put out feelers looking for work elsewhere. This marks the end of her tenure at Harper's Bazaar. Please stay tuned for part 2 of this series where I dive into the story of Diana's time at Vogue magazine and her role as consultant for the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.